Serial killers are an unfortunate fact of life. They've been around for a very long time, and unfortunately, they'll probably be here forever. Now, when I say serial killers, I know the names that are popping into your head right now. Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Gary Ridgway, Richard Ramirez, etc., etc. None of those names are on this list. This list is 10 serial killers with the highest known and proven victim count. And before we begin, I have to let you know that it will surprise you. More than one of these convicted killers is walking around free right now, as you're watching this. Also, the guy on the list that has the most victims, the guy who's killed the most people on the planet, is eligible for parole in 2023. That means, depending when you're watching this video, this could be a free man already. Alright, let's begin. Number 10. Giuseppe Greco. Giuseppe was a hitman in the Sicilian Mafia, and during the Second Mafia War in the early 1980s, he would murder tons of people. He was the leader of a death squad for the Mafia that included a lot of other people that were just like him. That being, they were also fugitives with warrants. He would often use an AK-47, which was his favorite weapon, but he wasn't limited to it. For example, he would also use strangulation and, at least in one instance, a car bomb. He eventually became an underboss, but would still participate in doing the dirty work. He would eventually be killed in his own home, shot to death by two friends, by order of a different boss. Mafia life is wild. After his death, he was convicted of 58 murders. Number 9. Samuel Little. Samuel Little, aka the Choke and Stroke Killer. I do, by the way, have a full video with interview footage of him that I'll link down in the description. Anyways, Samuel was obsessed with the thought of strangling women. He said that his fantasies had begun in kindergarten when his teacher would touch her neck, and strengthened in his teenage years where he would collect true crime magazines that showed women being choked. His reign of terror lasted for over 30, possibly even over 40 years, beginning in 1970. During that time, he was arrested numerous times, but would always be let off, which allowed the murders to continue. He would sexually assault, strangle, and murder 93 women, but was only convicted of 60 and received 4 life sentences. He eventually died in December 2020. There was no final determination of the cause of death. Number 8. Xing Hai. Xing Hai, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. This guy is the most prolific serial killer in China since at least 1949. He was born into a poor family and at the age of 17 left school to travel and work as a laborer throughout China. He started getting into trouble in his 20s for theft and sexual assault. After completing a 5-year sentence in prison, he was released in 1999. After his release, he would start his rampage. He would start entering people's houses and kill everyone inside, with weapons like axes and hammers. This would go on for 4 years, and when he was eventually caught and arrested in 2004, he would be executed by firing squad. Yang had 67 victims. Number 7. Kampatimar Shankariya. Kampatimar Shankariya was a serial killer in India who would murder people by hitting them just below the ears on the neck with a hammer. He confessed to killing over 70 people between 1977 and 1978. He was found guilty and hanged in 1979. Showing some regret, his last words were, "I have murdered in vain. Nobody should become like me." Number 6. Pedro Rodriguez. Pedro Rodriguez is the real-life Dexter Morgan. He started killing at the age of 14 when he killed his own town's deputy mayor for firing his father. That kicked off a killing spree that would span from the 60s to the 2000s. He would rob drug dens and kill traffickers. He then met a girl who got pregnant. Shortly after that, she would be murdered by a rival gang leader. Pedro would eventually gather some soldiers and get revenge by torturing and killing several people connected to that gang leader. This eventually turned up some info on where that gang leader that killed his girlfriend was, and Pedro, along with his friends, would go to a wedding party to pay that leader a visit. 7 people died and 16 were wounded. This was all before Pedro was 18. He would later go on to viciously murder his father and kill over 40 inmates. Because of Brazilian law, the maximum anyone can serve in prison is 30 years. So Pedro, having killed 71 people, became a free man in 2018. Number 5. Daniel Camargo Barbosa. Daniel Camargo Barbosa was a child and woman killer. He targeted them because he believed they were most likely to be virgins. Yeah, this guy's a sick fuck. I don't want to spend too much time on him, honestly. He was arrested for strangling young girls, but he would escape and start killing again. He was eventually caught again and murdered in jail by a nephew of one of his victims. He has 72 victims. Number 4. Mikhail Popkov. Mikhail Popkov is a Russian serial killer who was nicknamed the Werewolf because of how brutally he mutilated his victims. His spree lasted from 1992 to at least 2010. He was motivated by his wife's alleged adultery. He would target prostitutes or drunk women, as he would be dressed up as a police officer and offer them free rides, where he would then sexually assault and murder them. He was convicted of 22 murders in 2015 and then confessed to more later on. His total number of victims ended up being 78, and he's serving life in prison. Alright, now we're here down to the final 3. These next 3 guys all have the same thing in common, and that is that their victims were children, and not only were they murdering them, they were, sexually assaulting them. So if you, understandably, don't want to hear about that, the time to click off of this video is right now. Alright, let's continue. Number 3. Javed Iqbal. Javed Iqbal would target runaways and orphans in Pakistan. He would strangle them and cover up his crimes by dissolving the bodies in acid. In 1999, he was eventually arrested after sending a confession letter to the Lahore newspaper chief news editor. When police and reporters got to his house, there were bloodstains on the floor and walls, a chain he used to strangle the victims, and photographs of his victims in plastic bags. After being sentenced to death, the judge said, "You will be strangled to death in front of the parents whose children you killed. Your body will then be cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, the same way you killed the children." That sentence couldn't be carried out because Javed hanged himself. He had 100 victims. Number 2. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez would make a living by stealing cars and selling them to chop shops when he was a teenager. He says that during his time in prison for car theft, he was sexually assaulted, and that while he was still in prison, he hunted down his attackers and killed them. He was eventually released from prison, and he began to murder young girls. He was once again arrested, and I don't know why, but he was released soon after. He said at the height of his spree he was killing 3 people a week. He was arrested once more when an abduction went wrong and market traders trapped him in 1980. In 1994, he was released and put into a mental hospital. 4 years later, he was declared sane and released on just $50 bail. Apparently, he killed again in 2002, for which he was never caught, and to this day, he's still missing. He's had at least 110 victims. Number 1. Luis Garavito. After extreme sexual and physical abuse as a child, Luis Garavito started getting symptoms of psychosis, paranoia, and depression. He would heavily rely on alcohol to cope and had made many attempts to take his own life. He began to assault and torture the local youth. Luis says one time he had used an Ouija board, and the devil asked him if he'd like to serve him. Luis said that he would, and the devil said, "Kill that with killing many things may come. Apparently, taking this seriously, Lewis started on a killing spree that left, at the very least, 138 victims dead. But the number is thought to be above 300. There's a lot I don't even want to mention here, especially the way in which he was murdering people. If you're interested, give that a Google, but it's extremely brutal, so this is your warning. Lewis was arrested in 1999 after an attempted attack went wrong, and he was taken into custody. He got 1,853 years and 9 days in prison, but because of Colombian law, the limit someone can be imprisoned is 40 years. And because he was helpful in finding the bodies, his sentence was reduced to 22 years. He's eligible for parole in 2023. He plans to become a Pentecostal pastor and help abused children upon his release. So there you have it, the 10 most prolific serial killers on the planet. Fuck all of these guys. I can't believe 2 of these guys are walking free right now, and 1 could be very soon. If you enjoy the video, please gently tap that like button and subscribe for more weird shit. Bye.
If I paid him